When I was 15, I used to think my family was just a little dramatic. Not broken, just loud, proud, and a bit emotionally clumsy. But by the time I turned 23, I understood that some families don't accidentally hurt you. They aim. My name's Mason, and last month I passed my welding certification exam. It took 6 years of odd jobs, night shifts, and early mornings at community college to get there. 6 years of sweating through steel fumes and holding flashcards while my hands were too tired to grip a coffee mug. And the night before my exam, the single most important day of my life, my mom cornered me in the kitchen and said, "Your brother needs help moving his couch." I wish that was a joke. I didn't grow up thinking I was the invisible one. It just sort of happened slowly, like a water leak under the floorboards. My older brother, Chase, was always the golden child. He was the kid who got his name painted on the wall above his bed, complete with a little football and 2 stars on either side, while I shared a room with peeling wallpaper and a bunk bed that creaked like it was begging to be put down. Chase was 3 years older than me, and somehow always 3 steps ahead. When he barely graduated high school, my parents threw him a backyard barbecue. When I made the dean's list my first semester, Mom glanced at the email and said, "That's nice, honey. Can you take the trash out?" Chase didn't really do school. He floated between jobs like a leaf in the wind. Gym receptionist, then real estate intern, then something involving cryptocurrency that never quite made sense, and ended with him accidentally maxing out Dad's second credit card. Meanwhile, I picked up weekend shifts at the scrapyard and studied on breaks, because welding didn't come easy to me, and neither did sleep. I'm not the genius type. I'm the grinded-out type, the one who gets up at 5 and learns by repetition. But in my house, Chase could breathe wrong and get praised for his lung capacity. I could be bleeding from both hands and get asked why I was making a mess. It wasn't all bad, I guess. My grandma, Dad's mom, was the only one who seemed to see me. She used to call me Maze the Maker because I was always building things, even with scraps. But she passed away when I was 17, and whatever small buffer I had from the family hierarchy went with her. After that, I was just the spare son, the helper, the errand runner, the one who always had time because apparently having goals wasn't real unless you wore a suit or posted about it on Instagram. And Chase? He moved into an overpriced apartment last year with his girlfriend, now ex, and when that imploded, because of course it did, he decided to downgrade to something more modest. That modest place was a duplex 25 minutes across town with a second-floor walk-up and a couch that, apparently, weighed as much as his ego. He waited until the night before my exam to mention it. I was in the living room, cross-legged on the carpet with my notes spread out like a shrine to pipe angles and safety codes. He walked in like he still lived there. Technically, he'd moved out, but the house still had his scent, expensive cologne and entitlement. "Yo, Maze," he said, flicking a rolled-up pair of socks at my leg like we were 12 again. "Need your help tomorrow." "Morning. Couch is a beast." I blinked at him. "Tomorrow's my welding test." He paused. "Oh, right. You're still doing that. Still doing that." I looked over at my mom, who was making tea in the kitchen. She hadn't said anything yet. She didn't even glance at me. "I've been studying for months," I said carefully, trying not to sound defensive. "I need to be there at 8 sharp. It's the practical exam." Chase groaned. "Dude, it's just one morning. I'm not asking for a kidney." That's when Mom turned around and finally chimed in. She didn't yell. Not yet. Her voice was sweet, that fake calm she used when she was winding up for something worse. "Honey, your brother's trying to build a real life. He can't do everything on his own." My hands went cold. "And I'm not." She didn't answer, just gave me that tired look, like I was being dramatic for even daring to put myself on the same playing field. Then she added, "I just think you could reschedule. Or skip it. There'll be other tests." I laughed. Actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unreal. I've already paid the fee, and you can't reschedule it for another 6 months. This is my shot. Mom set her mug down harder than necessary. "So you're saying no?" "I'm saying I can't. I won't." And that's when the screaming started. She snapped like a rubber band, pulled too tight. "He's trying to build something for himself. You're just playing pretend with your little metal toys." "Welding? Really? You think that's a real job? You think that's going to take care of you?" Every part of me wanted to shrink. But something else, something sharp, started to rise in my chest. I stood up, slowly, and for once I didn't apologize. I didn't beg to be understood. I just picked up my notes, walked past Chase, and headed to my room. My dad, silent as always, pretended to scroll on his phone in the hallway. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking, maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should have just helped and rescheduled. But then I remembered all the times I'd been the one bending, the one saying yes, the one putting myself second so that Chase could be first again, and again, and again. So I packed my things. Not all of them, just enough. My boots, my helmet, my notes, and my favorite hoodie, the one with the scorched sleeves from that summer I helped rewire a metal barn roof. And I left, quietly. No speech, no drama. Just a front door closing at 1:47 a.m. and the sound of my old Civic starting in the driveway. I slept in my car that night, and the next morning, I passed my welding exam. I figured that would be the end of it, that they'd ignore me like usual, pretend I was just having a phase, and wait for me to come crawling back with an apology and a wrench in hand. But that's not what happened, because when I left, I took more than my backpack with me. I took the last thread holding their illusion of normalcy together. And without me there to prop it all up, their whole little house of cards began to collapse. But I didn't know that yet. Not then. I was just a guy with a certification, a sleeping bag, and a quiet kind of rage that I'd spent years swallowing. A rage that was finally, starting to grow teeth. For the next few days after I passed my welding exam, I floated in this weird limbo between exhaustion and pride. I hadn't told anyone at home. No text to mom, no call to Chase, not even a hey, I passed. It felt too sacred to share with people who would just roll their eyes or nod politely and ask if I'd considered getting a business degree instead. I just kept to myself, crashing on a buddy's old futon, nursing coffee like it was for fluid, and thinking for the first time in years that maybe, just maybe, I could have a real life that belonged to me. I figured they'd try to contact me, that there'd be at least a half-hearted attempt from someone in the family to pretend like they cared. But radio silence. Not even a thumbs-up emoji from Dad, which, if you know my dad, is communication. The only ping I got was from Chase, 2 days later. Didn't expect you to actually flake. Nice. No question about the test. No acknowledgement of what I'd been working toward for years. Just that. I didn't respond. Then a week later, the guilt campaign began. It started with a text from Mom. You've made your point. Can you please stop punishing your family for loving you? I stared at the message for a full minute before setting my phone down without replying. Loving me? That's what that was. Screaming at me for prioritizing my future? Dismissing my entire career path as pretend? They had a funny way of showing love. And suddenly, I was very tired of explaining myself to people who never listened. But I should have known that silence wasn't going to be enough. The next morning, I got a call from Aunt Marcy, Mom's sister. We weren't close, but she'd always been decent to me in a distant, smile at Thanksgiving kind of way. So when I picked up, I expected small talk. Instead, she sighed heavily and said, Mason, I just got off the phone with your mom. What is going on? I blinked, sitting up straighter. What do you mean, what's going on? She's in tears. Says you've gone completely off the rails. She said you cursed her out and stormed out in the middle of the night. Mason, you know she's been through a lot lately. You can't just abandon your family. I was so stunned I actually laughed. What? That's what she said, Marcy replied. That you're having a rebellious episode. That you're staying with strangers and refusing to come home. Strangers? I was staying with Caleb, my best friend since middle school. His couch had more family value than half the hugs I ever got growing up. She's lying, I said, my voice flat. I didn't curse at anyone. I just told them I couldn't skip my welding certification. And then she screamed that I wasn't building a real life. So I left, quietly. There was a long pause. Then Marcy cleared her throat. Well, that's not what she told the rest of us. And that was the moment it clicked. They weren't just trying to guilt me into coming back. They were trying to rewrite the story. To make me the unstable one. The ungrateful son who stormed out, instead of the one who finally stood up for himself. And in that version of the story, Chase got to stay the hero. The one who tried, who needed help. And I was the one who caused pain. I ended the call pretty quickly after that. I wasn't rude, but I didn't sugarcoat things either. And Aunt Marcy? She didn't say much in return. I could tell she didn't want to get involved. 2 days later, Chase posted a picture on Facebook. Big thanks to all the real ones who showed up and helped me move. Appreciate the love. In the photo, he's standing next to 2 of his gym buddies, smiling like he just landed a movie deal. And in the comments? Mom wrote. So proud of you, sweetie. Starting your new life with integrity and grace. Grace. Integrity. That was it. That was the moment I felt it, the snapping point. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just this deep, bone-level clarity. They weren't ever going to understand. And worse, they didn't want to. They liked the story where I was the bitter failure too stubborn to see how good I had it. It was cleaner that way. Easier to digest. But I wasn't going to play along. That week, I started making moves. Caleb hooked me up with a guy he knew at a fabrication shop across town. It wasn't fancy, but the pay was decent and they needed welders who actually knew what they were doing. I showed up with my certification in hand and a fire in my gut. The foreman shook my hand, looked at my sleeve burns, and said, "You'll fit right in." It wasn't glamorous. I burned through gloves faster than I could replace them. My boots smelled like molten metal by day 3, and my lunch breaks were 10 minutes of silence in a gravel parking lot. But for the first time in years, I wasn't pretending. I was building something, earning my way, and still nothing from home. No congrats. No how's the job. Just silence, except the occasional text from Mom that read like passive-aggressive greeting cards. Family isn't supposed to be this hard. You used to have such a kind heart. Don't let strangers turn you against your blood. Blood. They loved that word when it suited them. Then came the phone call I didn't expect. I was 3 weeks into the new job when Dad called me. Actual call, not a text, and said, "We need to talk." In person. I hesitated, but something in his voice sounded off. So I agreed. We met at a diner halfway between my place and theirs. I showed up in my work boots and a sweatshirt I hadn't washed in 2 days. He came in wearing his old windbreaker, looking like he hadn't slept. We sat. The silence was thick. Then he said, "Your brother got fired." I didn't say anything. He made some bad calls with that crypto nonsense. Spent more than he made. His lease fell through. He needs a place to stay. I stared at him. Okay. Dad looked uncomfortable. Your mother and I were hoping he could move back into the house for a while. Just until he gets back on his feet. I almost laughed again. That's fine. It's your house. Dad rubbed his temples. Thing is, we were hoping you could move back too. Help out with bills. You know, chip in. There it was. The real reason. They wanted me to fund Chase's comeback tour. I leaned back in the booth. Let me get this straight. He blew his rent, lost his job, and now you want me to help pay the mortgage while he sleeps in his old bed and plays entrepreneur in the living room. Dad didn't answer. I just got certified. I'm finally working. I have a shot at something. And you want me to give that up for him? He's your brother, Dad said. He needs us. I looked him dead in the eye and said, so did I. And then I got up and left. I didn't cry. Not in the car, not back at Caleb's. But something inside me finally settled. A decision. A turning point. I was done begging to be seen. Done auditioning for a role I was never going to get. But just when I thought the worst was behind me, when I thought the absurdity had peaked, it happened. The betrayal. It came in the form of a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A letter. I got home from work one evening, and Caleb handed it to me, eyebrows raised. Looks official, he said. From your parents. I opened it with grease-stained fingers. Inside was a formal notice. Not legal, but close. A typed-up message on letterhead that said, essentially, we've decided it's time to make some financial changes. Since Chase is in transition, we've allowed him to sublet your old room. In order to access your remaining belongings, please coordinate with him directly. Any items unclaimed by the end of the month will be considered forfeited. I read it 3 times. They gave my room, to Chase. Without even asking. Without a word. And the cherry on top? Chase had signed the bottom of the letter. Just a little signature, scribbled in blue ink. Like it was a business deal. I didn't go into Caleb's house that night. Not right away. I stood on his porch for a good 20 minutes, just staring at the letter. Reading it. Rereading it. Trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood something. Anything. That maybe it was a joke. A prank. A twisted way of calling me back home. But it wasn't. It was real. Typed, signed, and mailed with intention. They gave my room to Chase. They erased me, again, like I'd been a placeholder until their real son got back on track. I walked down to the curb and sat on the edge of the street, arms on my knees, letter crumpled in my fist. That's when I realized it was already creased down the middle, folded carefully, deliberately, which meant someone, probably my mom, sat down at a table, typed it all out, and folded it like she was sending a wedding invite. There was no hesitation. No conflict. Just quiet dismissal. That was my rock bottom. Not the letter. Not even the room. It was realizing I had been so easy to cut out that they didn't even bother lying to soften the blow. They didn't say temporarily. They didn't say we hope you understand. They used the word forfeited. Like my life was a package left too long on their porch. Returned to sender. I didn't tell Caleb that night. Just nodded when he asked if I was good and went into the guest room. I laid on the pull-out, turned toward the wall, and let the weight of everything settle on top of me like the ceiling had caved in. Over the next few days, I didn't talk much. I went to work, welded whatever needed welding, and kept my head down. I didn't mention the letter. Didn't bring up Chase. I think Caleb sensed something was wrong. He's the kind of friend who knows when to back off. But I could feel myself shrinking. Like I was becoming someone else. Someone quieter. Numb. There was one night, though, when I snapped a little. We were watching TV, some dumb cooking show, and the host said something like, "You've got to know your worth before anyone else does." I muttered, without thinking, "Unless your family convinces you it's zero." Caleb muted the TV. "Okay," he said, not unkindly. "Tell me what happened." So I did. I told him everything. The fight before the exam, the silence after, the guilt texts, the Facebook post, the diner conversation with my dad, and finally, the letter. He didn't say anything right away. Just looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Maze, they're not your family. Not anymore. They're your origin story." It hit me like a steel beam to the chest. Because he was right. I'd spent years thinking I was a defective piece of the puzzle, trying to force myself into a space that was never shaped for me. But maybe the point wasn't to fit. Maybe the point was to build my own damn table. The next morning, I asked my foreman if I could take on extra shifts. I told him I needed the hours. He looked at me, grinned, and said, "You're not going to sleep for a month, kid. You sure?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm sure." That month, I worked harder than I ever had. Early mornings, late nights, weekends. I took every scrap shift no one wanted. I welded through blisters, skipped lunch breaks, and poured myself into the work like I was trying to burn the pain out of my system. And slowly, quietly, it started to help. The noise in my head dulled. The ache in my chest softened. I was still angry, still hurt, but I was also moving. And then, about 5 weeks into that grind, something unexpected happened. I got promoted. Not officially, no title, no raise yet, but the foreman started pairing me with the newer guys, having me check their joints, show them how to correct their arcs, give feedback without barking orders. At first I thought it was just a fluke, but then he pulled me aside and said, "You've got an eye, Mason, and you've got patience. That's rare." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Later that week, I bought myself a new set of gear, high-end gloves, a fresh helmet, even a set of custom earplugs molded to my ears. It felt indulgent, sure, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was worth investing in. And then something wild happened. I got my own place. It was a small studio, not much bigger than a garage, but it had a working heater, decent water pressure, and a window that looked out over a scrapyard where the sun hit the rusted metal just right in the mornings. The landlord was chill, didn't ask too many questions, and let me sign a lease month to month. I remember standing in the center of that studio on move-in day, just me, a twin mattress, and a folding table, and feeling this wave of quiet peace. I had nothing, but it was mine. I didn't post about it, didn't announce it to the world. I just started building a life. Slowly, quietly, one bolt at a time. There were moments that made it harder, of course. One night, I stopped at a gas station and saw my mom filling up her car at the next pump. She didn't see me. Or if she did, she pretended not to. I watched her for a second. The same tired coat, the same messy bun she wore when she was cleaning the house. And for a moment, I felt that old urge to walk over and say something. To ask why, to ask how. But I didn't. I let her drive away without a word. Because by then, I'd learned something important. Closure isn't always a door someone else opens. Sometimes it's you, standing alone, choosing not to knock. One weekend, Caleb came by with a housewarming gift, a beat-up microwave and a plastic plant he said looked like it survived a war. We sat on the floor eating microwave burritos, and I finally told him my plan. I want to start my own thing. Not big, not yet, but maybe mobile welding, custom metalwork, repairs. He grinned. Maze the maker, back at it. Maybe. I spent the next few weeks researching, learning about small business permits, mobile rigs, equipment costs. It wasn't easy. I barely scraped enough after rent and food to save much, but I started putting money aside. Slowly, dollar by dollar. And then came the call. From Chase. No caller ID. Just a voice I hadn't heard in weeks. Mason. Hey. I didn't say anything. He continued, look, I know things got kinda weird, but I wanted to talk. Maybe clear the air. I should have hung up. But something in me wanted to hear what excuse he'd come up with this time. You know how Mom is, he said, chuckling. She freaks out, gets all intense. I didn't mean for you to lose your room. That wasn't my idea. Did you sign the letter? I asked flatly. He hesitated. I mean, yeah, but only because she said you didn't care, that you weren't coming back. She lied, I said. And you helped. He went quiet. Then, in a softer voice, he added, I'm trying, man. I really am. I got a new job. It's remote, but decent pay. Trying to clean things up. I didn't reply. Finally, he said, I miss having a brother. And maybe once, I would have cracked. Would have reached across the void and tried to fix things. But not now. Not this version of me. I hung up. No rage. No speech. Just silence. Because that was the real power I had now. I didn't need them. Not for validation. Not for shelter. Not for meaning. I had built something out of nothing. Just me, a pair of gloves, and a back that never stopped aching. And it was only the beginning. Because while they were still busy pretending, still playing house with their broken deck of cards, I was about to start stacking real bricks. And when I was done, they'd hear about it. But not from me. By the time autumn rolled in and the mornings started biting with that early frost, I had my own rhythm. Wake up at 6. Quick coffee. Weld until my back felt like a steel beam. Come home to my little studio. Eat whatever Caleb insisted on leaving in my fridge, and fall asleep to YouTube videos about welding rigs, tool storage, and small business taxes. I'd become obsessed, not in a desperate way, but in a focused, sharp way. Like my old life had been trying to smother me, and now I finally had room to breathe. But the thing about breathing again is, eventually, you start thinking clearly. And when I did, that's when the setup began. It started with a notebook. A plain, spiral-bound thing I picked up from the dollar store on a whim. I flipped it open on my workbench one night and wrote 4 words across the first page, in thick black marker. They think I'm gone. Because that's what it all boiled down to. My parents, Chase, they had erased me. Not in a fit of rage, but like it was a filing error. A silent delete row. They assumed I was some ghost in a flannel hoodie who would drift away, never be heard from again. And that assumption? It was going to cost them. But I didn't want revenge that came from pettiness. Not just a social media post or a family text war. No, I wanted something clean. Something strategic. A revenge that looked like success. That sounded like silence. That felt like a man rebuilding his own life brick by brick, while they sat wondering why the house kept getting colder. So I made a plan. Page 1 of that notebook had my mission. The next 30 were filled with steps. Contacts. Quotes. Sketches. And timelines. I'd never been a planner before. Always the guy who worked hard and hoped things would sort themselves out. But now, I was surgical. The goal, launch a mobile welding business by spring. Not flashy, not big, just real and sustainable. Step 1 was getting a reliable rig. My Civic was great for short commutes, but I needed something that could haul metal, gas tanks, and gear without throwing a rod. Caleb helped me scour listings every weekend. We even visited this mechanic an hour out of town who was selling an old Ford F-250, beat up, rusted at the base, but solid engine and a reinforced bed. I stood in front of it, arms crossed, and asked, will it get me to jobs without dying on the freeway? The mechanic, a guy named Roland with a cigarette behind each ear, nodded and said, kid, this truck's uglier than my first divorce, but it'll outlive us both. Sold. I drained half my savings on it, but it felt right. Like putting down roots in motion. I spent the next 2 weekends cleaning it out, sanding the frame, repainting it matte black, and installing a set of second-hand racks for my welding tanks and toolboxes. Caleb, who had become part cheerleader, part co-founder, helped me brand it. We mocked up a logo one night over beers, something simple but bold. Mason Works Metal. Sounds legit, he said. Sounds like a guy who doesn't live on a futon anymore. I replied. We both laughed, but there was this spark behind my ribs that hadn't been there before. Something new. Pride. Step 2. Get licensed. I'll spare the boring details, but between permit offices, business insurance, EIN registration, and safety compliance paperwork. I felt like I was swimming in red tape for a month. I'd work full shifts, come home, and then spend 3 more hours buried in forms and how-to guides. But the deeper I went, the more determined I got. This wasn't just about building a business anymore. It was about becoming undeniable. No one could say I was playing pretend now. Step 3 was more personal, and this is where the real setup started to take form. I knew that if I ever wanted closure, real closure, I had to face the root. Not just avoid it, not just outgrow it, confront it. So I went home, not to talk, not to cry, just to collect what was mine. I sent a polite but firm text to Chase. Nothing dramatic. Just, hey, I'll be by this weekend to grab my remaining things. Please don't touch anything. He replied with, sure, whatever's left is in the basement. The basement, not even my old room. Of course. Saturday came. I rolled up in my truck, parked halfway down the block, and walked up the driveway with gloves in my back pocket and my heart beating like a war drum. The house hadn't changed. Still had the same cracked mailbox and plastic flamingos stuck in the flower bed. It looked smaller than I remembered. Less like a castle, more like a cage. Chase opened the door, wearing gym shorts and a tank top like he hadn't aged a day. He gave me a nod like we were still boys in the backyard throwing rocks at the fence. I didn't return it. You can go around back, he said, gesturing toward the garage. Stuff's by the water heater. I said nothing and walked past him. The basement smelled like mold and old memories. My boxes were there, dusty, bent at the corners, one of them half open with a pair of my boots tossed on top like trash. I went through them slowly. My helmet, my first set of gloves, a photo of me and Grandma, the edges curled, a notebook full of welding diagrams from trade school, things they probably thought I didn't care about, things they didn't care about. I packed everything into crates I brought from the truck, taped them, labeled them, stacked them cleanly. The whole time, no one came down to talk. I could hear the TV upstairs, hear Mom's laugh in the background, but no one acknowledged I was there, which was fine, because before I left, I did one last thing. I pulled out a small envelope from my pocket, printed on thick cardstock, professionally embossed with my logo and my new business name. Inside was a simple one-page flyer. Mobile welding services, launch date, services offered, and contact info. I slid it into the junk drawer in the kitchen, right next to the spare scissors and expired coupons. Let them find it. Let them sit with it. A few days later, the calls began. First it was my aunt again. Sweetheart, I saw your business ad on Facebook. Your mother posted it. Congratulations. I blinked. She posted it. She said she's so proud of your entrepreneurial spirit. I nearly dropped the phone. Not a word to me, but proud on Facebook. A few more days passed, and I got a text from my dad. Just a screenshot of my truck, parked outside a job site, logo gleaming, with the words, "Looks good. Your grandfather would have liked this." It didn't come with an apology, but it didn't have to, because the next setup came in the form of a contract. One of the guys from my old job, a senior welder named Raul, reached out about a subcontracting gig, said he liked my work ethic, and his cousin owned a construction firm that needed metalwork done for a set of new housing units going up on the west side. Cash flow's good, he said, and it's your name on the invoice. I met the cousin. We shook hands, agreed on scope and pricing. I signed my first real contract under Mason Works metal that night. I took a photo of the check when it cleared and printed it. I didn't mail it, didn't even wave it around. I just pinned it to my workbench, right next to the crumpled letter from my parents. One piece of paper said forfeited, the other said paid in full. I didn't plan to get involved with the neighborhood association project, not at first. I just wanted to weld, build things, grow my client list. But life has a funny way of setting up your revenge for you, quietly, behind the scenes, while you're busy rebuilding your life from the ground up. It started with a woman named Sharon. She was in her late 50s, ran the local neighborhood association for the Oakview Expansion Project, a mid-tier suburban development on the edge of town. Her husband had seen my truck at a job site, snapped a picture of the logo, and gave her my number. She called me the next day. "We're looking for someone to fabricate custom railings for 20 new units," she said, "and possibly assist with some gate restoration on the older properties. Your name came up. You come highly recommended." I nearly dropped my phone. This wasn't just a big job. This was a public job. High visibility. Consistent work. A contract that would not only pay my rent 6 months in advance, but give me something more valuable, credibility. I met her at the site, gave her my pitch, showed her photos of previous work, certifications, insurance. I was nervous, overprepared, sweaty, but she nodded, flipped through my folder, and said, "You're the first guy we've met who actually came prepared. The board votes next week, but I'd say you're in good shape." I got the contract 2 days later. And then, the universe did its thing. 3 weeks into the project, I pulled into the neighborhood early to get a head start. I'd just finished unloading steel rods when a familiar voice floated across the cul-de-sac. "Wait, Mason." I turned slowly. There she was. Mom. Hair perfectly curled. Starbucks cup in hand. Wearing that same smug smile she always wore when talking to people she needed to impress. She was walking a small white dog on a pink leash, one she used to swear she hated. And next to her, Chase, in joggers, wearing sunglasses despite it being overcast. I didn't flinch, just wiped my hands on a rag and nodded. "Hey." She blinked like she'd seen a ghost. What are you doing here?" "I run metal fabrication for Oakview now," I said, nodding toward the railing behind me. "Custom installs, gate repair, that sort of thing." Chase squinted. "Wait, this is your company." I smiled. Just a little. "Yeah, Mason Works Metal. You might have heard of it." Their faces were priceless. Turns out, they'd just moved into Oakview. Of course they had. Apparently, after Chase's crypto thing imploded and his rebound job fell through, they scraped together enough to co-sign a unit together, one of the pre-furnished townhomes built during the first expansion. A last-ditch effort to start fresh, away from the city, away from the drama. Too bad the drama followed. "Wow," Mom said after a pause. "Good for you, sweetie." "Sweetie." I nodded. "Appreciate it." Then I went back to work. But something about that run-in, it stuck in my head. Not because I wanted to impress them. Not anymore. But because I saw something behind their eyes I hadn't seen in years. Uncertainty. They didn't know who I was anymore. And that was power. Over the next few weeks, the Oakview job became my second home. The residents loved me. I showed up early. Did the work clean. Didn't cut corners. Word spread. I started getting calls from people outside the association, asking about custom furniture, signage, even sculpture work. I was booked out for 2 months straight. Meanwhile, Chase and Mom were right there, living among the people I now worked for, watching as the kid they'd once mocked, the one who'd been called just a welder, slowly became a name people respected. Then came the HOA meeting. Sharon called me one afternoon and said, "Hey, the board wants to recognize you at the quarterly meeting. You've made a huge impact on the neighborhood. Can you stop by and say a few words?" I agreed. I wore my best shirt, clean jeans, brought a photo slideshow of before and after projects on my iPad. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, same place where they held family barbecues and wine nights. About 40 people showed up, including Mom and Chase. They sat near the back. I didn't look at them once. Sharon introduced me. I spoke for 5 minutes. Simple stuff. How I got into welding, what I love about it, how grateful I was for the opportunity to work in a community that values craftsmanship. When I finished, they clapped. All of them, even Mom. Afterward, during mingling and refreshments, Sharon pulled me aside. "You know," she said, "a few of the older units here are still technically under the first HOA management company. They're a bit of a mess, late on repairs, behind on paperwork. It's slowing us down. But next quarter, we're voting on consolidating the board, bringing everything under one management, which means we'll be looking for a new maintenance and fabrication lead for the entire subdivision." I raised an eyebrow. "That's a lot of ground to cover." She smiled. "You'd be paid very well, and you'd have oversight over all property repairs, including who gets prioritized, who gets skipped, what gets deferred." I understood immediately. Chase and Mom's unit was part of the old block. I kept my face neutral. I'd be honored. The vote passed a month later. And just like that, I was the man they had to call for help. The first request came within a week. A service ticket from their address. Loose stair railing. Potential safety hazard. I marked it as received, then let it sit. For 3 weeks. They sent follow-ups. Polite at first, then urgent. "Please advise, we have elderly guests visiting. Stairs still unstable. This is a safety issue." Chase even called my work number. I didn't answer. When Sharon eventually asked about the delay, I told her the truth. "I'll get to it, but I've got a backlog." Priority goes to residents who've supported the work since day one. She just nodded. Makes sense. Eventually, I went. I took my time. Showed up late. Brought extra noise. Drilled slowly. Loudly. Left metal shavings in the walkway. Still did good work. But no small talk. No eye contact. Just work. Cold. Clean. Professional. When I finished, I handed Mom the invoice. Full price. No discount. She took it with shaking fingers. Before I turned to leave, I said, "By the way, your faucet's leaking upstairs." She blinked. "What?" "Second floor. I heard it while working. Might want to fix that." She started to speak, but I was already walking away. And that's when I knew. They got it. Not just the message. The entire picture. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't thrown a tantrum or written a Facebook post or called the family together for some big dramatic reckoning. I'd done something worse. I'd succeeded without them. I'd built something they couldn't touch, couldn't dismiss, couldn't take credit for. And now, they had to live in it. Every railing, every gate, every polished weld they passed on the way to their car. I was there. I would always be there. But not for them. Just around them. Like a shadow they couldn't shake. Months later, Caleb and I sat outside my shop. Yes, my shop, because I'd finally rented a small warehouse on the edge of town. It was mine. The business was steady. I had 2 part-time guys working weekends. I had a waiting list. And most importantly, I had peace. "Ever think you'd come this far?" he asked, cracking open a soda. I looked around. At the truck, the shop, the silence. Then I smiled. "No," I said, "but I knew I'd leave them behind." And that's exactly what I did. They tried to bury me, but I wasn't gone. I was welding the foundation they'd never get to stand on.